What's going on, everybody? I'm Primalliquid and welcome to my guide for Atelier Ryza 2. Now in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to create the best armor in the game with the max stats possible. So let's jump straight into it, shall we? Now straight off the bat, there are two armors in the game. Well, I say two armors in the game. Two armors in the game that you would technically be using at the end game. However, they each have different effects, and because of that, the armor you want would depend on, entirely on what you plan on doing. The armors in question are the Draconic Heart and the Layered Valvet. Now, Draconic Heart is pretty much only used for one thing and one thing alone, and that is for going for 1,000,000+ damage on the Lamb minigame. Now, when it comes to the actual armor that you're going to be using the most of the time, like the most beneficial one, it's going to be the Layered Valvet, just because the effects are far more suited to everyday use rather than being so specialized like the Draconic Heart is. And so for this video we're going to be making the Layered Valvet. Now, just like Atelier Ryza 1, we're going to be starting on the lowest item possible in the recipe chain, just so we can start building up the actual quantity for more cloth dumping later. And then we're also going to need a whole bunch of waste cloth as well, ideally completely maxed out, so where you use the essence boost, for example, to gain all 7 stats and things like that. But you want to do that for all the cloths, I should add, along with the ingots as well and the levers, because we're going to be pretty much using them all. Anyway, to start things off, we're going to be making a cloth. Now, the item you put here doesn't really matter. What we are going to do though is in this bottom thread, I am going to use an effect spread 1 item, just so as soon as we put a neutralizer in here, this one will already be marked as complete because of the effect spread, and then we can go straight into the Traveler's Coat. Before that though, I am going to use a Celestial Essence here. What this does is this increases the material slots gained when we change recipe by 1. So every time we change recipe, we're going to be gaining an extra quantity. This is going to add up quite a lot later on. So let's go ahead and quickly use that. Then we're going to dump any old neutralizer in here. It doesn't really matter which neutralizer you want to dump. However, what I would say is if you use the neutralizer here, well, basically use this neutralizer to put your traits on that you're going to use. So for me, I'm going to be using attack and defense charge, defense and speed charge, and infinite vigor. So I'm going to go ahead and place that there. So now all of my traits are on the item and I have nothing to worry about. So once that's done, we're going to go ahead and drop a Restraint Silk in to move on to the Traveler's Coat. Now, this is where things get really annoying. Unfortunately, we need to put in 2 Restraint Silks here, and I've not come across a way of getting effect spread over to the recipe over here. We can use a medicinal effect spread, however, it's only effect spread 2, so it won't actually take us all the way over, so we would still be using 2 items in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump in 2 Restraint Silks. Unfortunately, you can't get these from seeds either, so you can't actually get a restraint silk with the effect spread on. It's just one of the sad things about making this ultimate armor, and unfortunately the Draconic Heart suffers from the same problem. Anyway, onto the Noble Tunic. We're going to go ahead and drop a normal cloth in first, and then for this threads, we're going to use a Heavenly String with the effect spread 2. And this way we can move straight on over to the Bestial Air recipe by dropping 1 in right there. Okay. So now we're on to the Leather Protect, and for this we need to go up the way to the Soldier's Cuirass. So for the Animal Hide, we're just going to dump 1 in there, and again we're going to dump another 1 in here as well, because once again, unfortunately, I've not found a way to effect spread over to the recipe. So drop a Rusted Sword in, and we're now on to the Soldier's Cuirass. Now this one is... basically, we need to get over here. We have animal products and a cloth. What we're going to be doing is, for the animal products, we're going to be using a dread leather, simply due to the fact that way we can still gain a decent stat boost. Even though we could actually effect spread it over, there's not much point in that. Instead, we're going to be using 2 items instead of 1, but both of these 2 items would give us a stat boost, so it works out better in the long run. And then for the cloth, we're just going to put in a normal Whisk cloth and move on to the recipe, which requires a Primalliquid to take us over to the Radiant plate. Okay, now that we're on the Radiant plate, this is where things start to diverge. If you go over to the right and use a Master Lever, that changes to a Fortress Armor. That is the way you want to go if you are making a Draconic Heart. However, we're not making that, we're making the Layered Valvet, which means we need to move over here and use a Puny Lever to go into the Mimicry Robe. So what I'm going to do now is, in this metal tab right here, I'm actually going to use a metal piece. However, I'm going to be using the Samastern ingot. Now, the Samastern ingot is a very unique one. You cannot make this ingot, you can only buy it. And in order to gain effect spread on this, you need to level up ingots all the way to level 20 through Rommy's shop. However, doing this, we still gain a start boost and then we can move straight on to the next recipe. So it's highly recommended. It's much better to do a Samastern there than a normal ingot plus a Cremonea there. It saves us an extra quantity basically, which we can then dump into a stat later on. Okay. So now that we are on to the Mimicry Robe, we need to move all the way down here to the right. Now, I've tried a few different methods here in terms of trying to preserve quantity. However, the easiest way I found is just to bite the bullet and use 2 Startiums here. There is a Puny Ball here, which would require 2 items to make it to the recipe, 1 Startium and 1 Ancient Philosopher's Stone down there. And then once you have that, you can move on to the recipe. However, I prefer just to use the Startiums and then a Whisk cloth to move over. And then for the Puny Ball, it doesn't matter what you use. Okay, so drop a Dream Powder in, and we are now on to the Fairy Cloak. And now we need to move all the way down to the bottom right to make our final change to the Layered Valvet. Now, here in the flowers, I'm actually going to be using the Glass Flower with the Effect Spread perk. So go ahead and drop that in. And now we can move straight over to a cloth here, which again is going to be a Wheat cloth because it offers the highest stat boost possible. And then here in the flowers, once again, is going to be a Glass Flower just for the Effect Spread. And then here in Dream Powder, unfortunately we have to buy the bullet and just use one because you can't get a cloth item with effect spread. Anyway, drop in a Dread Lever, again, max stat item, so we can turn it into the Layered Valvet. Okay, we are now on the Layered Valvet, and as you can see, we have 40 quantity remaining. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to actually use a elixir. In this case, it's going to be the Ancient Philosopher's Stone. Now, obviously, as you can see, it's not upgraded my earth materials. That is perfectly fine. I really don't care about that in the slightest, simply due to the fact I'm going to be finishing this item off in item rebuild later, and right now the most important thing is gaining stats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a Whisk cloth there just to open up this way. You can technically use a Wind Elemental if you want. In fact, that would probably be more beneficial actually if I use a Wind Elemental Ancient Philosopher's Stone. And then what I can do is I can just move on over. Yeah, so use a Wind Elemental Philosopher's Stone. Okay, so now here we have the Dread Lever. Now, this will give us a little bit lower stats by putting this in instead of using the quantity on a Whisk cloth. That's alright, because if we actually look at the effect, increase status effect resistance and reduces magic damage taken. This is one of the effects that we're actually going to boost with a Fire Essence. So once that's dropped in, we then have basically one more essence that we can use. But if you look at the left-hand side, the effects are actually really good. So it depends entirely on what you personally want to boost here. Now, for me, I actually really like the effect one here, which is Lord's Glory, because obviously, you know, extra status resistance and it reduces magic damage taken. A lot of the attacks on the end game optional boss are magic based, so that's going to come in handy. And then here we have reduced damage, which is reduce all damage by 10%. That again is a very good one. Down here we have resist KO. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky one, to be honest, so I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Over here though is Quality Texture, which just grants a chance to gain additional AP from normal attacks as well as any other action. The upgrade here isn't really that beneficial, so I just leave it as Quality Texture instead of boosting that. Now, as for the Resist KO, basically, when it comes to when you have all of your gear made and all of your items made, a KO is not the worst thing in the world. Like, it's very, very easy to come back from a death. So resisting it is rather a waste, to be honest. It's like, even fighting the optional super boss on charismatic difficulty, I had characters die every now and again, and it was so easy to get them back up to full health because the elixir in this game is just so broken. So I'm actually going to be completely ignoring this effect because I don't think it's that worthwhile. Instead though, what we are going to be boosting is the reduced damage, because we're going to be gaining this effect every single time we get hit. So in terms of effectiveness, it's actually far more useful than Resist KO, because Resist KO is only going to be used once in a blue moon. You know, it's only going to proc once in a blue moon. Whereas the resist damage is going to be there pretty much every time we get hit. So that's why we're going to go for that one. So now that we've boosted our two important effects, we're now basically just going to dump all of our Weascloth into the item to actually gain a massive stat increase. Obviously, I've already put my traits on, so I don't need to worry about that. And even though there are a few things that we've not learned yet, we're going to be doing that in item rebuild. So as you can see, straight off the bat, just look at those stats. Although, let's do that after I add my traits, because we're going to be using an attack and defense charge, defense and speed charge, and then finally we're going to be using infinite vigor. And the reason for this is increases maximum HP and stun. Now what this means is we'll be less likely to get stunned. It's not really that important apart from when you are fighting the optional super boss on charismatic difficulty, because he can actually break you very easily. So that's why infinite vigor comes in very handy. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. Okay, so now that the item is made, as I mentioned, we are going to rebuild the item now, just so we can actually go ahead and max out some of the effects that we didn't do before. So I'm just going to dump in some, you know, some random items here just to quickly max them out. Really doesn't matter what you put here, honestly. Like, as long as you actually max the stats, it is perfectly fine. And here we're just going to go fire, dump in some of them. Okay, is that everything maxed? Yeah, so that's everything maxed. So now we can go ahead and finish that off. Again, make sure you are careful when selecting your traits, because the last thing you want to do is choose a wrong trait at this point and have to remake the entire thing. And yes, I am speaking from experience there. Okay. So now that the valvet is made, we are still not done. Instead, we're going to go to Dennis's workshop and rebuild it here as well. Now, because the armor has 4 effects already on it, we can't actually gain any effects from reinforcing. What we will be gaining though is extra stats. So basically, we have a couple of options here. We can gain HP, attack, defense, or speed. Now, HP, attack, and speed gains are rather minor, unfortunately. There are no items that really give you a massive increase to any of these stats. So instead, we're going to be doing defense, and we will be using Heavenly String for this, because it will give us an extra 52 defense per use, along with a bit of extra speed to go on top of that. So let's go ahead and confirm that with 3 Heavenly Strings used. Again, be careful of your traits. And there we go. It is now made. We have the perfect armor. So let's take a look at the stats and effects, shall we? Okay. So as you can see, this armor is better than my currently made one. That's simply due to the fact I've mixed around my cloths a little bit, so I could actually gain a couple of extra stats. But in terms of effects and traits, we have Lord's Glory Extra Large, which increases status effect resistance and reduces magic damage taken. We have Quality Texture, grants a chance to gain additional AP from normal attacks, as well as any other action. Reduced damage, 10%, which is rather self-explanatory. It reduces all damage by 10%. Resist KO 7%. When receiving a fatal blow, grants a 7% chance to survive with 1 HP. Largely useless. This is more a fluff ability, you know, it'll come in handy every now and again, I suppose, if you're fighting the super boss on Charismatic. Anything below that, though, and you'll probably never ever see this effect used. In terms of traits, we have attack and defense charge, just because, you know, extra attack and defense is always nice. Defense and speed charge, because it's an armor, defense is the main way to go. And we have no other way of boosting attack on this armor. Speed, because speed is lovely. And infinite vigor for the extra HP and stun protection, basically. And there we go, guys. That is how you create a perfect armor in Atelier Ryza 2. An armor with 908 defense. It's lovely, isn't it? Anyway though, guys, I hope you've all enjoyed the video and I hope you found it helpful. If you did, then please be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, then make sure you hit that subscribe button as well for even more Atelier Ryza guides. Still though, guys, thanks for watching and I will see you all soon.